everybody, and welcome to this episode of Attachment Theory in Action podcast. I'm Kirsty Ruggles, and I am excited to be your host today. As most of you will know, our wonderful host, Jenna, has taken a break to engage in some self-care, and I thought that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to spend some time talking about self-care, what self-care is, what self-care isn't, and really how we can engage in self-care that is truly beneficial to us. So as I was thinking about this topic, the first thing that came to mind is that self-care really is a term that I personally feel is overused nowadays. And there's really pros and cons to the fact that it's overused. One of the first positives of everybody using and knowing the term self-care is that it means that it's on everybody's agenda. Everybody has an awareness of it. And so stress now is really an accepted part of life. Most employers offer mental health days or time to engage in self-care activities. Many more employers are much more understanding about the fact that people are living stressful lives, and that everyone experiences stress. So this idea and acceptance of the fact that stress happens and we can respond to it accordingly is great. It's great that we have this heightened level of awareness. I think the con is that there is a big level of misunderstanding about what self-care actually is. When people use the term self-care, I think they often think about, oh, well, I'm going to take a walk and that's self-care. I'm going to have a hot shower and that's self-care. And that they're not wrong. That is a form of self-care, but there are other forms of self-care that I think we also need to be aware of to ensure that we truly are taking care of ourselves, and that we're not just distracting from the stress that we're feeling. We're not just putting a Band-Aid on it for half an hour or a day or a week, and that we're actually truly taking care of the things that are causing us the stress, and truly then taking care of ourselves. So during this time, what I wanted to kind of dive into and talk about is what stress is, and what some of the more specific types of stress we can experience, especially if we're helping in a helping professional role. And most of us probably listening to this are in helping roles, whether that be a paid role or a voluntary role, and working with children and families in some context or another. So first of all, something that we have to remember, and I've kind of alluded to this, is that stress is a very normal part of life. All of us experience stress at some point in our lives, to some extent. And so it really impacts everyone. It's unavoidable in most cases. And so it's good that we remember this. And in fact, when we think about stress, in terms of early childhood development, we really want, in the nicest way possible, for our infants and young children to experience minimal and small amounts of stress so that their body's stress response system can learn to cope with it. A healthy stress response system is developed in the context of a supportive relationship. So when you think about an infant and the types of stress that an infant might encounter, the stress of feeling hungry, the stress of having a dirty diaper and needing changing, the way that we respond as the supportive caregiver helps that infant's brain and stress response system learn to turn off. And we do this through that process of co-regulation. And once that infant learns those processes of co-regulation, their brain and their stress response system develops and becomes a healthy stress response system. It turns on when a stressor is encountered, and it turns off again when the stress has passed and we've received enough support and the body is able to say, whew, I'm not in danger anymore. I can come out of survival mode and I can turn that stress response system off. We know that problems occur when our stress response system is on for prolonged periods of time. And so, for our children who have experienced trauma, this is often the case. Their stress response system stays on. They don't necessarily have that supportive caregiver to help them switch it off and help them regulate. And so then they start to experience those symptoms of toxic stress. The same can be applied to us as adults. So if you are working in a stressful work environment, you may often find that your stress response system is on constantly, or when you leave to go home, you still feel that high level of stress. Your heart's racing, you maybe are struggling to take deep breaths, you're more agitated or easily agitated. And so we're starting to then experience higher levels of stress. A couple of the other more specific types of stress that we might experience, particularly in those helping professional roles, one is burnout. And so burnout is feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and just feeling like you cannot do your job successfully or effectively. And this can often happen when we feel a lack of support in our work, or feel that we don't have the resources that we need to do our job successfully, or that we're just generally overwhelmed, and we cannot respond to the demands of the task. So burnout is one of those, one of those terms that we hear a lot nowadays. And I think particularly in these helping professions, it's something that many of us experience. The other more specific type of stress that we can experience in our roles when we work with children and families is secondary traumatic stress. And this is what occurs when we have symptoms that stem from secondary exposure to extremely stressful situations. I think a lot about folks that work in the child welfare system and who often have to encounter traumatic events, and can often witness, children who are removed from their families due to traumatic experiences. And I think about how challenging and hard it could be sometimes for an individual to hold all of that information and to have experienced that, and see the pain and distress of others during that time. And that's where we can see some of those symptoms of secondary traumatic stress start to come out. How do you know that you're experiencing some of these? Well, if you're experiencing burnout, you may well be avoiding certain situations, putting things off, really not enjoying the work anymore that you're doing. If you're experiencing just general stress, you might anger more easily, have less patience. You might avoid certain people or places. If you're experiencing secondary traumatic stress, you may actually have some maybe nightmares or images coming into your mind when you don't want them. You might find yourself numbing out when that happens, or numbing out when you're around the people that maybe triggered that secondary traumatic stress. So those are some things to look out for if you are feeling stressed, to help you try to narrow down what type of stress you're actually experiencing. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is because the type of stress that you're experiencing is often going to determine what kind of self-care you engage in. So if you feel that you're experiencing some just low levels of stress, maybe just general stress, day-to-day stress, you might engage in some of those more traditional self-care activities, like engaging in exercise, taking a hot bath or shower, spending time with loved ones, maybe reading a book, watching your favorite movie, those kinds of activities that help you switch off that stress response system that says, whew, telling your body, I can relax now, the stress is past. You might engage in some deep breathing, in some yoga or meditation, or some guided imagery. Remember, though, that these activities are not designed to be a band-aid, that you really have to make sure that your body is responding, that it's not just another way of numbing out or avoiding the stress, that you're truly trying to make your back brain relax and switch off. If you're experiencing burnout, or stress that is really disrupting your daily level of functioning, this may require other forms of self-care. For burnout, you may seriously consider evaluating your current job role. Maybe you want to talk to your supervisor about managing expectations, or about the demands of the job and the support that you're receiving for those demands of the job. You may want to seek out support from someone else who is doing a similar job to you, asking them for help, asking how do they prioritize the tasks that they have, how do they manage the expectations of the job, are they receiving support that you might not know about, is there help out there that you might not know about? And so you can see how that kind of self-care is different to those more traditional types of self-care. If you're experiencing secondary traumatic stress, this is something that really is going to require a very different type of self-care. We would suggest that you speak to somebody who has clinical knowledge in this area, a professional such as a therapist or a counselor, who can help you process the traumatic experiences that you are witnessing or experiencing vicariously throughout your work. This might be a form of talk therapy, maybe some CBT, maybe some trauma processing to help you with that. We have to remember that as helping professionals, we often put our own needs aside to support others. But if we don't take care of our specific needs first, we cannot be fully present for those that we're working with. So it's really important for us to narrow down and identify what kind of stress we are experiencing first, so that we can determine what kind of self-care we want to engage in, or that we should engage in to help us relieve that stress, relieve some of those feelings of burnout, and manage any symptoms of secondary traumatic stress that we might be experiencing. It's really important that you are doing things that truly take care of your mental well-being, and that aren't just a band-aid or a distraction for a short period of time. Thank you so much for joining me today, just for this little introductory podcast. And I really hope that you were able to get something from this information about self-care. And I hope it gets you thinking about how you are engaging in self-care, what it looks like for you, and if you're truly taking care of yourself.